I'm slow. I'm crazy.
Do it.
Say the invocation.
It's tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow. I see all these people here, yeah.
There's 5 and 10. So he's home on the couch. Yeah. Should, yeah. And then, he's up here today too. They
Oh, that's where you take over tomorrow.
wrapped up.
Take over tomorrow.
Yes, he's the new assistant county manager.
Yeah. I should be down there.
I know.
Before we're there.
First.
At this time, I'll call to order the City of Joliet pre-council meeting for March 31st, 2014. Mayor Tom Girani presiding. Mayor?
Start with the roll call. Mayor Girani.
Here.
Councilman Girl.
Here.
Councilman Hug.
Here.
Councilman McFarland.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Odeker.
Here.
Councilwoman Coleman.
Here.
Councilman Turk.
Here.
Jim?
This evening, I think we want to start off with a presentation, and I'll turn it over to the city attorney for those introductions.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, a few meetings ago, I was asked to put together a presentation by the consultant that the city engaged over a year ago now to assist it with the redevelopment of Evergreen Terrace in the event the city would be successful in the condemnation litigation. Tonight is the night for that presentation. As you'll remember, in November of 2013, the City Council approved an agreement with Holston Development Company to serve as the city's management and redevelopment consultant, actually, for Evergreen Terrace. And Holston Development was selected after a competitive process undertaken by staff, soliciting and meeting with several companies engaged in that line of work. And at the end of that process, staff was convinced that Holston was the best firm with the best track record to assist Joliet with Evergreen Terrace. I have here tonight the principal of the company, Mr. Peter Holston, here tonight. I'd ask Mr. Holston to come to the podium if he could and introduce his team, and he'll have the floor.
Thank you very much. Mayor and council members, we appreciate you making time for us tonight to do some discussions about Evergreen Terrace. We're going to do it in 2 parts. With me tonight are Andrea Keeney, she's a senior development manager, and then Kendra Freeman, who's head of a nonprofit affiliate of our company that works in resident services. Holston has been in business continuously since 1975. We've worked mostly within the city of Chicago. However, we also are developing in the village of Riverdale. Our primary focus is affordable and mixed income housing. We also do some mixed use real estate development as well. We have strong relationships with all the funders that have to be assembled to do something like this. And we feel that we've had a lot of experience in taking on challenges to redevelop sites that have a lot of concern on the part of the neighbors. So what we'll start with is a presentation by Kendra Freeman on the resident services part that we do at most of our sites, and then from there on we'll go into a little bit of history of Holston and talk a little bit about the potential for development at Evergreen Terrace. So I'll ask Kendra to come up here and start the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you again for the opportunity for us to come, and specifically for me to come and tell you a little bit more about Holston Human Capital Development. There's a PowerPoint presentation I'll be referring to. Oh, I figured out the clicker. So Holston Human Capital Development began as a division of Holston Real Estate Development Corporation in 1999. And like most things, we began out of a need. At that time, Holston was developing Northtown Village, which was one of the first mixed income properties that was going to incorporate market rate owners, market and affordable renters, and returning CHA residents. So at that time, there was no formal support process for CHA public housing residents who were going to be transitioning out of traditional public housing into mixed income environments and private management. So we started Holston Human Capital Development as a division with 3 employees, and we had about 79 families who were coming from traditional public housing into Northtown Village. From then, we've grown to 3 employees and 1 site of 80 families. Now we service close to 1,000 clients. It's 6 sites that are owned by Holston Management. And in 2008, we took our division and we separated from Holston Management, and we incorporated as a separate not-for-profit organization. Our mission and our purpose is really rooted in working with at-risk populations to help them connect to viable resources that promote self-sufficiency, wellness, and stability. We accomplish this through comprehensive service provision and developing low and affordable income housing and cultivating dynamic partnerships in order to foster economic development. The heart of what we do is really rooted in the principle that if we're building safe, high-quality, viable communities for our residents, it will give them a great platform on which to build a strong quality of life. We have 3 core program components. They are resident services, workforce development, and community building. Just to highlight a few of our successes, again, we serve low and moderate income clients in 5 communities who are living in subsidized housing. To date, we've assisted over 600 public housing households in their transition to new housing, and we facilitated over 250 employment placements in various industries. Under our resident services division, it really focuses on service coordination to families, seniors, and disabled people who are living in our subsidized units. So we work with families from the onset of when they apply for a subsidized unit. We go and we meet with them in their homes, we meet the family. We conduct a comprehensive needs assessment to talk about what they would need to be successful and what resources are available and what services we provide. We also talk a lot about what to expect from the communities that they're going to be moving into. This is particularly important for our CHA clients, because oftentimes when they move into mixed income properties, it's their final housing, so they can't just decide the next day I want to move and go somewhere else. So we want to make sure that they understand the obligations as a leaser and that they're ready for that commitment. In addition to the needs assessment, we do that initially, and we also do that every year for our families. We do case management referrals. Senior-specific services, so annual senior benefits checkup, coordination of in-home services to make sure that our seniors and our disabled clients are able to maintain their housing and live independently for as long as possible. We do individual goal planning and capacity building as well as one-on-one coaching. We also work with the property management staff on lease compliance resolution. So if any of our clients have a situation where there's a lease violation, we get a referral and we have a small window of opportunity to meet with the family and help them correct that problem in order for them to avoid eviction. We also conduct biannual home maintenance trainings, and we do quarterly in-home visits with our clients. We also work with different partners to do youth enrichment programs and mentoring programs. Under our workforce development arm, our staff works to maximize direct placements for those clients who need employment, and also working with clients who are underemployed to help them gain either education or skills so that they can increase their income and hopefully move off of public assisted programs. So we do in-house work readiness and skills training. We also do direct placement and work with programs to do transitional employment placements, because not everyone may be ready for a full-time job. They may need some help to get there. We also do linkages to literacy, continuing education, and bridge programs. In the city, one of our strong partners is City Colleges of Chicago, to help clients build their skills and have direct relationships with employees for the programs that they're training for. We also do employment networking meetings and individual coaching. So we have relationships with employers, or have them come in and talk about what it means to work in this position, their expectations of an employer. And a lot of times we'll couple that with training programs. For example, if there's a CNA training program, we'll have city colleges come in and talk about the training program that the residents can enter into. And then we'll also have a home health services provider come in and talk about the employment opportunities to help connect the dots for the residents of why they should invest 6 months of their time into an educational or training program. Additionally, we facilitate 2 technology learning centers at 2 sites, and we offer a variety of different programs to help support education and skill building. We have basic things from keyboarding software to help people learn or improve their typing skills. We also have online GED support and literacy support educational software to help those who are preparing either for the GED or who may have to take a placement test to get into a training program, so that they don't necessarily have to go off-site to access those services. And also online, we have a workforce readiness training component in addition to financial literacy. Our community building arm really works to help our clients get engaged in the community. Outside of the site, we really believe in being good partners and good neighbors in the community. So we encourage our clients to get involved in things like CAPS and get involved in the local schools if they're parents. We also work with a lot of local service providers to enhance what we can offer to our residents on the site. So we do a number of informational and educational seminars. It could be anything from helping parents choose a high school for their children, to having ISAC come in and talk about the process for financial aid to help your child apply to college and get scholarships. We work with a number of health providers who do health and wellness programming, including walking groups, diabetes support groups, and just basic health and wellness information. We work with Charter One Bank and a number of other banks to do financial literacy education and asset building. And we also do community and cultural events to get people to know their neighbors and build neighborliness. You'll see the picture has one of our events there, one of our sites where it has a large Asian population. So there's a big Chinese New Year celebration every year, and that was actually from a day of dance that we did where we had several different cultures come in and perform. We also do youth enrichment and mentoring programs. We're very focused on expanding our programming to address the issues that youth face and to help them be geared towards, if not college, going into employment or vocational training when they finish high school. A few of our partners are highlighted on this slide. We work with a number of partners. Chicago Cares helps us sponsor a reading program for kids K through 6th grade, and that happens just about every week on our site. We've worked with Story Catchers, which is a picture in the center. One of our kids who were introduced to their summer apprenticeship workshop had opportunity to go to the White House and meet Michelle Obama because the organization was actually honored for their youth programs. In that program, we've worked with for 5 years. It employs up to 10 of our youth every summer, and they're trained as theater apprentices to actually go and perform a musical to different youth groups throughout the summer. And the growth of the children who've been involved in that program is really inspiring. Some children who can't really speak publicly are up on stage singing by the end of the program. It's been a great partnership. We also work with Oak Street Health, Near North Health Service Corporation, Simply Home Health to do a number, again, of health and wellness activities of our site. One of particular note is we have an exercise-based fall prevention exercise program in our senior buildings, and that's focused on helping our seniors build their lower leg muscles to decrease their risk of falling down, and that's been very well received. AssistHer is one of our partners that we use for youth mentoring that we have worked with for a number of years to provide direct mentoring and also do some parent counseling as well with us. The map here shows the areas that we serve in. So we're in the Near North community in Chicago, in the South Loop, North Lawndale, Uptown, and again in Riverdale, Illinois, which is kind of cut off on the map. We're at the Hilliard Apartments. Hilliard is an intergenerational site. So we have seniors and we have multifamily housing. There's 654 total units, and our caseload there is about 381. So we're serving primarily the CHA households, but we offer open services to the entire community because there's a number of folks in the affordable housing units that also come to us for assistance. The Lawndale Apartments are 170 units that are scattered site throughout North Lawndale, and we provide general case management and workforce development services there, and that's on the west side of Chicago. Northtown Village, which we talked about earlier, 264 units. Our caseload there, the public housing families, which are 144 individuals, and we do service coordination, employment, and community building there. And then Parkside of Old Town, which is very similar to Northtown Village. It's actually built in the footprint of the old Cabrini Green. Both are in the same neighborhood. We have 251 clients on our caseload there, and there's a very strong focus on employment placement and skills training at Parkside. In Worcester Crossing, out in Riverdale, 130 units. We have a target caseload of 26 or so units that are subsidized by the Housing Authority of Cook County, and we also provide general services to the entire community. And then finally, the Wilson Yard Apartments, which is in Uptown on the north side of Chicago. Again, that's another intergenerational site where we're serving both seniors and families. 80 units in the family housing, 98 units in the senior housing. There's a strong focus on senior services there and employment in the family buildings. And that's my presentation. I tried to keep it brief. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have specifically about Holston Human Capital Development or the services that we offer.
Questions?
Just one. What year was the Riverdale development built?
2007.
2000. So all those apartments that we just saw the picture of, that was 2007?
Yes, this is the rehab.
To the left. Oh, and the right is the rehab part? Is the
The
left?
left
what
is rehab, the right are the new construction buildings.
Okay, so you rehab the one on the left, and then the new construction's on the right. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kendra.
Okay, now we'll get set up here to go into the development part. Okay. All right. I started Holston Real Estate in 1975. Since that time, we've done over 5,000 housing units, rehab and new construction, mixed use, mixed finance, and affordables. It's been our focus. Kendra has done a nice job of taking us through some of the sites, but you'll see here Parkside of Old Town, which was part of the redo of Cabrini Green. The high rises came down, and then we built new construction, mixed income throughout rental and for sale properties. This gives you some ideas what the old Cabrini looked like, it being torn down, and then some of the new buildings. Model unit in a for sale building, model unit in a rental building. Parkside consists of two high rises that have condo units in them, two high rises that have rental units in them, and then a bunch of townhomes that have the different income groups in them. Wilson Yard was actually our largest mixed-use development. This entailed constructing a Target store, an Aldi store, some small retail, and then two housing buildings on a 5-acre site on the north side of Chicago. This was a CTA rail repair shop that burned down a number of years ago, and actually went through a 10-year process with the community trying to get cohesion on what people wanted to see there. So we tried a lot of different iterations and finally got something that we thought would satisfy most people in a combination of retail and housing. Just an idea what the land looked like before we started. Here's the after showing the housing buildings, a view out of one of the rental buildings, the retail along Broadway. Worcester Crossing, which we talked about, actually was built in the 1960s as workforce housing for the steel mills. It fell into disrepair over the years as those jobs dried up. The village asked us to come in and help them redo it. So the first phase, which we have completed, was renovation of 90 townhomes and two mixed-use buildings to be constructed. The rest of the site has about 300 townhomes left in very poor repair, and we're consulting with the village right now on what to do with those. Just give you an idea of some of the befores. You see the troubled housing and vacant land and that type of thing that the village wanted cleaned up. So obviously the afters, you've got, we did new everything in the renovation of the buildings, and of course the new construction was all brand new as well. So Evergreen Terrace, we were very honored to be selected to work with the city on the potential redevelopment of this site. This site is not unlike other sites that we've worked with where you have different types of housing that's either functionally obsolete or a challenge to manage, and there's a new vision that needs to be applied to it. So we understand that the city would like to de-densify the area, which is what we did at Cabrini. And there are existing it's a HAP contract for a certain rent amount, which is valuable to keep, whether it's on-site or off-site. We were thinking about, to assist in relocation, that there would be some off-site construction for people to move to. And then whatever comes in its place on Evergreen Terrace, whether it's a rehab of some of the buildings, a complete tear down and start all over, or a combination of that, then some of those residents could come back. We do feel very strongly that it should not be a poverty concentration, but it should be mixed income. But we also feel that there needs to be decent housing opportunities for those that need to move out of the site. There was a study done several years ago that we are using as a starting point. Obviously, this shows Evergreen Terrace 1 and 2 as they are right now. So again, we talked about the relocation, and we were given some maps by the city to show possible locations for infill housing and maybe some small multifamily housing that could serve as relocation areas. The types of housing that could be considered, again, whatever makes sense, whatever fits in the neighborhood in terms of architecture. And we want this housing to last for a long time, so it has to be built very well. So on-site relocation initially, demolition of however many buildings the city decides that they want to do away with, construction of new housing on the site, relocating some of the tenants back, and we can do it in multiple phases because there probably is not enough money to put together in one pot to do it all at once. It'll probably have to be done in at least 2 phases. These are some numbers, just very, very preliminary numbers. Here's one where if we do nothing, this is what happens. You see that it cash flows very, very nicely, which I think is why the ownership was, the present ownership is, interested in hanging on to it. And then we also went to a scenario where we would take down Evergreen Terrace 1, which I believe is the larger of the two, and then continue with Evergreen Terrace 2. Again, these numbers work okay. The reason the numbers are good right now is because the rents are very strong because of the HAP contract from HUD. These rents might be greater than what we could get on the open market, so that's why this contract is valuable. Some alternatives that were suggested by the study company from several years ago. There's actually 4 of these that just give you some idea of, okay, tear it all down and put new, tear part of it down and do some new. And, you can also talk about, okay, well, who are the occupants going to be? Like I said, these buildings are functionally obsolete, so if any rehab would probably need to entail gutting out the insides and reconstructing with the size units that are more applicable, the number of bathrooms, that type of thing. So that's just a quick look. We're actually would be your consultant. We have a lot of experience, and we are used to working with groups of people with strong feelings one way or the other. We try and build consensus and get the neighborhood and the city what they want. So our suggestion for next steps would be to do some focus meetings Obviously, meeting with this organization, meeting with whatever neighborhood organizations have influence in the area, any civic groups, certainly have some talks with some of the residents of what they've experienced and what they would like. Local churches, schools, all the people that are impacted by the neighborhood should be consulted for their ideas. Obviously there is a need for affordable housing, but it's probably not wise to concentrate it. It's probably wise to have it mixed income. That's been our experience. We talked about having focus groups with the tenants about what their desires and needs are. The community as a whole needs to weigh in very heavily on what the finished product is going to look like. And then we engage an architect and come up with some ideas as far as design of both the replacement housing and the rehab, if that's the direction we care to go. So we're here to be used by you and the community to turn this into an asset for the neighborhood and the city. That's our job. So, any questions?
One question that's been bounced around is, where's the funds come from?
Okay, the funds, this is called layered financing, and the reason it's layered is because no single source of money is enough to do the job. So basically, what you do is we would approach the State Housing Authority, IDA. They have access to low-income housing tax credits. They have a trust fund that's funded by transfer tax on real estate transfers in the state. We would approach the county to see what part they could play in this. We would expect whatever we build here to be able to support a first mortgage from a bank or FHA fixed rate or something like that. So there'd be a bank, there would be the state, there would be the county. To the extent that the city has any money, we would look at that. And the Federal Home Loan Bank has a grant program. So we turn over all the stones and put it together, and that's why I say that there's not enough out there to do it all at once. It would probably be done in phases.
Any other questions? Who said that?
There-
Well, you'll get your turn, excuse me. Bob?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for coming. I think this council does have a lot of questions, so I think the follow-up meetings are going to be key.
Right.
Just a couple things. The properties that you've done in Chicago, and I'm familiar with most of those neighborhoods pretty well.
Sure.
I think the one that probably be closest to what we have at Evergreen Terrace would be the Hilliard Towers that you have at 22nd and Clark.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that was a rehab. They were built in the mid-'60s as 100% public housing. And so what we did is we did relocation, renovation, and then we moved back and made it mixed income.
Okay.
Yes,
And those towers, because the towers are still there, they never were torn down.
that's correct.
Who currently owns your company doesn't own the towers?
Yeah, we do.
You do?
Yeah, what we did is we purchased them from the Chicago Housing Authority for a nominal amount of money in return for some of the public housing residents being able to move back into the building. The Chicago Housing Authority funded some of the construction. They also fund what you would call a HAP contract for the rents. And then, it supports private first mortgage, so that was one of the sources. We got some home money from the city. We got some trust fund money from the state. We got tax credits either from the city or state, I can't remember which. But we did a bunch of layers.
Yeah, and then those property on the west side of Chicago, do you own that, the Lawndale
Yes,
properties?
yes, we own those. We actually, those were part of a large portfolio that another developer had struggled with for many years, and he just couldn't keep up with it. So HUD stepped in and took them off his hands, and then they doled them out to several city developers to re-renovate and then continue to operate.
And then the rest of the properties were, well, except for Riverdale, were on the north side.
That's correct.
Now, the Cabrini Green site that
Yes.
you referenced, are there private houses in there along with your buildings?
We did a very aggressive mix, which is, proving to be a continued challenge. But we thought when we responded to the proposals in 1999, 2000, that the city and HUD and the Housing Authority really wanted people to be economically mixed. So what we did is we constructed some for sale buildings, we constructed some rental buildings, and in every multi-family building are three income groups. So affordable, public housing, and market rate are in there. So the rental buildings, that's easy. You just designate apartments. It's a little more challenging in the for sale. We had several hundred for sale units, and so what we ended up doing is buying about 25% of those back from ourselves using another fund. So then with that setup, we could then rent those to public housing residents. So if you had like a row of townhomes, maybe 10 townhomes, there might be 2 or 3 of those 10 would be rented out to public housing. Right next to them were market rate owners. So that created some feelings. You know, some of the market rate owners say, well, you know, I paid $400,000 for this, and the family next to me, I mean, they're basically, their rent subsidized, they didn't have to buy it. But that was the flavor of what we were charged with, was to economically mix. So obviously that's where Kendra comes in. It's like, how do you get these people from very different backgrounds to get along? And that's what she works on.
In the other North Side programs, do you own any of those, or are those owned
Yeah,
by
we own them all.
Oh, so you-
Now, when I say own, I mean, I wish I owned them, but basically they're what's called a tax credit partnership. So for example, when we're doing that Wilson Yard project that had the Target store, there were 2 apartment buildings there. One was for seniors and one for families. And by doing affordable housing, you qualify for tax credits. We can't use the tax credits because you don't make that much money, but there are organizations out there like banks and large corporations that want to shelter their taxes. So they actually come in as a partner of ours for 15 years, and they get 99% of the value of those tax credits. In return, they pay us 95 cents on a dollar, and that becomes our equity. So for example, in the Hilliard project, that Hilliard project was $100 million. Our tax credit buyer was Verizon. I guess Verizon's doing well, and they pay a lot of income tax. So they were interested in those tax credits. And so they paid us $30 million cash for the use of those tax credits. That became our equity that then allowed us to borrow all this other money. And so it's a tax credit partnership for 15 years. And then in 15 years, the limited partner, Verizon or JP Morgan Chase or whatever it is, they go away. And then it's just our company and all the debt. That's what's left.
So, and then to tie it back to Joliet, the city of Joliet obviously doesn't pay taxes.
Yes.
The tax credits will not benefit the city.
And we wouldn't expect the city to be interested in the tax credits. If we did a tax credit deal on one or more of the properties on Evergreen Terrace, we would find a corporate investor that pays tax.
And again, this is the first time these questions are being answered. So
Sure.
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Do you believe our plan here is that we are going to reach out for private investors to invest in Evergreen Terrace, in the new version of Evergreen?
Yes.
And obviously, they're going to do so with the hope that they're going to get a return on their money.
They wouldn't do it otherwise. And there's extensive pro formas that get put together, a lot of review with accountants and attorneys. But for example, let's say that we decide we're going to build 200 new units at Evergreen Terrace. You know, maybe it's a $60 million construction, or total project cost or something. About 90% of that qualifies for tax credits. So maybe the tax credit equity comes in out of that 60 million, maybe it comes in at about 25 million or something like that. So for JP Morgan Chase to hand us 25 million to do the project, they get all these tax credits over a period of 15 years to shelter their income. Plus they get depreciation from the properties and other things to shelter their income. So they're looking at an internal rate of return of probably 15 to 17%. So it's actually, very enticing for these big corporations who pay taxes.
Now, in any of the projects you've worked on in Chicago, did the city of Chicago ever purchase the property and try to manage it like has been talked about here in Joliet?
No, the only thing that I could think of was, the housing authority over the years had owned property, which they had trouble with. And then they, found developers like us to take the properties and redo them. But I'm not aware that the city either has or owns very much housing.
I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
All right, well, two other questions, and then
Sure, no problem.
I'll stop.
No problem.
Has anyone from our staff approached you about who they're looking to partner with privately? What private entity they wish to come in and invest in this?
No, and usually that's done through a syndicator who has access to a lot of different corporations that, you know, it's either a pool or it's one big corporation, like, you know, we could have JP Morgan Chase, they've done a lot of our investments, so they would be interested in buying the credits, or any other large corporation that's making a lot of money. But again, they're only a partner for 15 years, and then they go away.
All right, the last question, thank you. The last question is, has anyone from our staff approached you with the idea that you or a not-for-profit or some other third party would be the actual owners of Evergreen and not the city?
No, but I don't know enough about the law. I would think that the city would want to set up a single-purpose entity or something, you know, to limit its liability.
I would think so.
But beyond that, I don't know what you guys have in mind.
I think so, and if we're gonna own it, we have to
Yeah.
discuss it, and it has to be
Absolutely.
vetted.
Yeah.
So
In fact, each one of our developments are a separate corporation. That's a legal planning.
I guess, I'm not sure, Jeff, legally, if the city can do that. I think we'd have to bring in a private entity to do that.
Actually, the Housing Authority, for example, did exactly what Peter's suggesting. They formed a single-purpose entity that they control, and that was step one in beginning the tax credit process. In our negotiations with HUD, HUD actually requires that project-based Section 8 properties be owned legally by a single-purpose LLC. So every project-based Section 8 in the country is controlled by a single-purpose entity, but there's nothing that would prohibit the city from forming such an organization. The Housing Authority did it, we can do it too.
Well, I know, again, it sounds like you work with CHA primarily.
Quite a bit, yeah.
I think going forward, to me, that's the direction this is headed. I think Councilman McFarland brought this up a couple months ago. I think either we're gonna need non-for-profits to step up, and I think they're here, they'd be willing to do it, or Joliet Housing Authority's gonna have to step in. This is their business, it's not our business to run housing. So, and again, it's not for you, but I think that's something, as we get closer to this, we're gonna have to vet that. And I think that may be the way the city needs to go, pursuing this project. Thank you, that's the question.
Anybody else down there?
I just have one question. Can you explain how the city of Chicago was able to, demolish all those public housing buildings? Was that due to HUD with their private investors, and are they the ones that did it?
What happened was a lot of public housing around the country got run down pretty bad over the years. And so it was, 10 or 15 years ago that HUD did what's called a viability test on all their public housing, all the public housing. And the test was, would it be cheaper for HUD to give everyone a voucher and let them move out and go wherever they want to go? Or would it be cheaper to renovate the buildings? And whichever is cheaper, that's the way HUD wanted to go. Well, pretty much in Chicago, every single high-rise failed that viability test. It would have been cheaper to voucher out all the residents than rehab the buildings. So that was a justification for tearing them down. So what the Housing Authority did over several years is, through a process of attrition, the occupancy fell. They didn't rent new apartments for several years. And then the occupancy got down so low that then they were able to go to court and say, Judge, the building is uninhabitable. We really want the rest of the residents to go, because some residents didn't want to go. They really need to go, so we can tear it down and start over. And that's how they got the high-rises torn down.
And do you happen to know, you may or may not, how many of those people were offered the first right to come back to those homes after they were remodeled, and how many came back to the city, period?
I think it was on a site-by-site basis. I'm obviously most familiar with Cabrini. In the mid-'90s, negotiations started between the tenants and the Housing Authority and the city and HUD about how many, if this is going to be torn down, how many replacement units are going to be offered. And I think the city offered several hundred. And of course, that angered the tenant, because there were 3,500 units when it was full. So the tenants went to court, and a consent decree was entered in 1999 that allowed for, I think, 781 replacement units and 270 affordable units that the public housing residents could rent if could afford the rent. And they also did a first out, first in. So the first building that got torn down and those people had to move, they were the ones at the top of the list to come back. And it's interesting because some of those buildings, some of the early buildings that got torn down, I think they were like the worst ones. They tried to tear down the worst ones first. They were controlled by the gangs and they were really, really rough. And it's interesting, we've done 2 phases of Cabrini now. One we did in 2001 and one we did over the last 5 years. The first phase, the people that moved in there from the first high rises that were torn down, they had a lot of bad habits. And we had to work with Kendra's group and a lot of people to try and, get things calmed down. The second phase that we're in the middle of right now, those came out of some of the other buildings later on that weren't as bad as the first buildings. Those families are not causing trouble at all. So it's really fascinating, sort of, sociologically how, okay, the worst buildings went down first, but they were the first ones to come back, but they also had the most problems. It's sort of interesting.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, then I'll go down here.
Sure.
They determine whether it's cheaper to rebuild or renovate.
Yes.
Because I heard talking with Michelson,
Right.
Slimelton, if it's over 50%, is that the cutoff? If it's more than 50%, or that's what I was told? Or
I don't know that we have any rule of thumb. I mean, we can run the numbers both ways. I mean, I think what trumps that though is the presence set up a good neighbor to everybody else. Because that'll make you try harder to keep it as is. If it's not a good neighbor to everybody else, then you look at de-densifying even though it's better. Yeah.
Sure, there.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Holstein.
You bet.
If I understand correctly, you've got quite a bit of experience working with CHA.
Yes.
Okay. So there was a cost, which you talk about HAP contracts and private investment and all that, for the either renovation or the demolition of the buildings that CHA chose to not rebuild, then it would be demolished.
Yes.
So there was costs of
Yes.
millions of dollars to do that.
Correct.
I don't see the parallel with the city of Joliet, and you can help me here?
Sure.
Because CHA already owned it. There were no acquisition costs.
Right.
We're looking at a $15 to $20 million in acquisition costs on top of the EJP. You referenced the EJP report.
Yes.
Have you had, I just got it last week.
Sure.
Have you had the opportunity to go through it with a fine-tooth comb?
Not with a fine-tooth comb, but I've looked at it on and off for
Okay.
a bit.
Do
yeah.
you have a similar report of your own, or are you working off of that report? For the cost for renovation? That report doesn't seem to include an accurate or even an attempted cost to acquire.
Right. That's correct. No, we would create our own numbers, and we've done just very, very general numbers right now because we really need to get a handle on what we're doing. What are we going to build? What are we going to save? And then we can put numbers to it. So that would be like the next step. We really don't have definitive numbers right now, but I'll tell you something that is different. I mean, CHA was able to go to HUD for the demolition money. So not only did CHA own the buildings, but they didn't pay for the demolition.
That's quite a savings.
HUD paid for it.
Got it.
Yeah, so yes, this is going to be a bigger challenge that we're not afraid of, but, we walked into the CHA properties, there was no acquisition cost. We're walking into this, there's going to be a substantial acquisition cost. And I understand that, there's you can pay now, you can pay later. I mean, the city could do a bond issue and pay off HUD. We had a meeting with HUD, and they said that, well, if you would keep some of it, we might consider allowing you to assume the mortgage on that piece that you're going to keep. So then that would, that would do away. Now, keep in mind too that if you were to pay off HUD and keep these buildings running for a couple, 3 years or whatever it is, they're throwing off enough cash flow that they would start paying against the bond issue. I mean, because they're already paying against HUD, but HUD would be paid off. So these things cash flow quite a bit. But as far as the relocation costs, the demolition costs, the new construction costs, we have to put together that bucket of money. CDBG, home money, item money, trust fund, tax credits, bank loan, Federal Home Loan Bank, maybe there's some other HUD grants, the nonprofit could get some grants, but it literally becomes a bucket out of which you relocate, you demo, you do new construction.
Now, if we were to,
mention was the crossing, because we did have experience with that.
Well, why don't you mention it?
Yeah,
That was your project.
I mean, just to speak to the acquisition process, first of all, I'm Andrea Keeney from Holston Development. Just to speak to the acquisition process, we did at the Pacesetter Development have to acquire 90 townhomes from individual owners, and then also 6 additional townhomes that we demolished, and we had to follow the URA, which Kendra's department, Holston Human Capital Development, assisted with. So we do have, I mean, it's not our first time doing this type of activity. We do have experience with that in the Riverdale project.
have you ever worked with a city, or even a housing, but a city that's attempting through condemnation to acquire privately held property?
No, I mean, it was different in Riverdale. I mean, there was the threat of condemnation there, but no, not specific. No, we did not have to go through with it, fortunately.
So, and it could be for either one of you.
Sure.
So, and you referenced that there's a much heftier acquisition. You can see that on the surface, acquisition costs on this project than Riverdale or even some of the CHA
Well,
projects.
it's interesting. Riverdale, the 90 townhomes probably averaged about, what, 40,000 apiece?
There were actually about 52,000, but that didn't
Okay.
take into consideration holding costs, and it was quite a bit of time that some of them were held, up to 3.5 to 5 years.
So 90 times 60,000 is 5 to 6 million.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's not that big as compared to
Right.
Evergreen Terrace. So we did have to buy out individual homeowners. We had to buy out a liquor store. I mean, to clear the land and stuff. But no, this, there is an acquisition cost here. That's going to have to be part of the project budget. Whatever we build on-site, off-site, all that is going to we're going to have to look at all that on how are we going to retire this acquisition price, whether it's retiring a bond issue from the city, whether it's, doing a loan assumption for a few years and then build new and then pay that off. This has to figure in there.
Well, and it's been suggested, not by you, it's been suggested that once we acquire this, we would tear down for roughly 60% of it. We would leave 115 units. So we're losing the cash flow on that 60%.
Right.
So that's going to make recapture of the acquisition and then the additional redevelopment, new building,
Right.
whatever else, moving costs, it's going to make it even more difficult to recapture if you don't have that up there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, if you get rid of 2/3 of it.
Right. You may not want to get rid of 2/3 of it. You may, like I say, I would never suggest that the mid-rise buildings be kept as is. At the very least, let's say 3 of them are kept or something. At the very least, those residents need to be temporarily relocated. The insides of those need to be gutted so that they become a modern floor plan. And some of the people come back, plus some new people. It's cheaper to do that than it is to just tear it all down and start from fresh. But, again, we got to see what the neighborhood and the council wants.
And Mr. Holston, I understand that you haven't put together even a solid preliminary yet. It's
Right.
early in the game
Yes.
on your side of it. We're still deciding things here.
Sure.
I got that. So with that said, really the only, and maybe we need to discuss that after you're finished with your presentation here, the only plausible estimate we have with numbers is the EJP report. And I think as a council, we need to discuss that after this. Because you yourself are still working through it.
Right.
Yourself.
Yes.
And this is a tough question to ask, but, because it's so preliminary, you don't really have any solid numbers yet. Can you guarantee it won't cost the city anything?
I'm
If
sorry.
we move forward, acquire it, whatever we choose to do.
Right.
Renovate, keep it, demolish, can you guarantee that all these funds that we're saying maybe might be there will come through?
It will over time. See, there's a pipeline. Anytime you give something away, there's going to be a line. The federal government essentially gives this money away. I mean, the tax credits are competitive allocation, and they're worth 25 to 30% of your total cost in the form of equity. The home money is competitive. The CDBG is competitive. So what happens is a lot of people are chasing, a lot of people in Will County are chasing this money. So you get in the pipeline. And like I say, I would highly recommend we do this in like at least 2 phases. And so you take the first phase, whatever that is, and we put the numbers together, we get everybody to sign off on it, looks good, the community's happy, we give it to IDA, and it goes in their pipeline. And we may not make the first round of cut. We may not make the second round of cut, but our experience has been, we've never had a project that has not been funded, but it could take a couple years. Because they usually look at projects twice a year. So if we put it in for, let's say we put it in for the first round is 2015, maybe like in March or something. We may not, they may say, you know what, go back to the drawing board, you gotta do this and this and this. Then we go back in August, oh, what do you know, we get funded. So, I don't see any way that this will not get funded. It's a prime piece of land. It's, as far as I know, the city is interested in preserving a good chunk of it as affordable housing, but certainly mixed income at the very least. And I'm sure the county is behind this, that something needs to be done there. So I think there's a lot of advocates for IDA to fund this. I mean, I think it's a high-profile project.
Well, when you mention county, frankly, and this, you wouldn't know this, but frankly, they're undertaking a couple $100 million project of their own,
Okay.
that they in fact probably want us to financially partner with them. So I don't know that that's an option.
Okay.
Because otherwise we're just pushing the same money back and forth
Yeah,
across the
right,
table.
right, right.
So we really don't know until we have some solid numbers on acquisition,
Right.
restoration,
Yeah.
demolition. So we can't even really say with all certainty just yet. It's kind of premature.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You bet.
Anybody else?
Just a couple quick questions.
Sure.
Thanks for coming, by the way. Your presentation was excellent. I
Thank
think
you.
it's clarified a lot of things, and I apologize, I'm fighting a cold here.
Oh.
With respect to your, you mentioned your special purpose entity, your LLC or
Yes.
LLP, whatever the case might be.
Right.
And you had mentioned, when you were talking about your capital stack, your IDA, home funds,
Right.
tax credits.
Yes.
One of the members, we'll call it an LLC, one of the members would obviously be the entity, whether it's a bank or a private investor, acquiring those tax credits. So that would be one of the members.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Who would the other member be? Would it be?
There's usually just a general partner and a limited partner. The limited partner is whoever's buying the tax credits, and the general partner is the development entity,
Okay.
whoever that might be. I mean,
I
again.
guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Who typically is that you?
Well,
Is that
it's
a private?
It's usually us, but in this case, my understanding, the city wants to retain ownership, so I believe the general partner will be some entity of the city, with us as maybe another type of partner. I don't know what.
Well, I guess my point is,
Yeah.
if we're coming in, if it's a limited partnership, and we're coming in as the general partner,
Yes.
we're obviously, that's going to put a lot of risk on us as the general partner.
The general partner has a lot of
Right.
obligations.
So
Yes.
I'm not so sure if that's a structure that I'd be comfortable with. And I also agree with Councilman Odekirk. I think the Joliet Housing Authority has a role to play here. I'm just not sure exactly what that role is.
Sure.
And I think as we go through this, this scenario, I think it's going to become clearer with your help. But I do think the Joliet Housing Authority, definitely has a role to play, with
Yeah.
respect to that.
Well, no, the city has to manage your risk. I mean, you
Right.
got to be careful here.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. And then do you envision just one LLC or special purpose entity, or could there be more than one in this project?
We usually do them.
Since it's large.
We usually do them per phase. So if we have 2 phases, 3 phases, there would be 3 different ones.
Because you might have another investor that says, look,
It
I want to
could-
take a piece of that deal.
Absolutely, yeah. Because like I say, your soft money from the government entities is not all going to come at once, and it's going to come over time. And so, but it's very possible you might have the same investor. Like when we did the Hilliard Towers down in Chinatown, Verizon did phase 1, and they came back and did phase 2. At Parkside, where we're on our 3rd rental building that would use that type of investor, Chase has done all 3. So,
Great, thank you.
Just a quick question, and then I had 2 for staff. You indicated the current property, if we were to redevelop there, would be mixed income. Is there a standard of how many units would be subsidized on that property?
there's rules of thumb, and again, this is just from our experience, but it could be anything. Up at Cabrini, for the city decided that it should be 50% market, 20% affordable, and 30% subsidized. We've seen other developments in the city of Chicago be a third, a third, and a third. I wouldn't you know, I think 50% market is nice because, you know, if, in a mixed income situation, you want your market to feel like there's sort of a critical mass, especially if they're buying. You know, if they're renting, you know, everybody can leave, break your lease. But if you're asking people to come in and buy in a mixed income community, there ought to be quite a few market rate. If it's all rental, third and third is no big deal.
Now, is that something that would have to be decided on once the funding package is put together that kind of
Right.
dictates?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, the reason why I asked that is we had a meeting this morning talking about affordable housing and the lack of it in Joliet, and we're doing some revitalization of some of our housing units within the housing authority. So that's why I was just curious.
Sure.
You know, this displacement of individuals. The other two questions actually is for staff. The first one is I noticed in the presentation that they just gave that they highlighted these off-site opportunities for scattered housing. And if I recall correctly this morning, we were going to give these to the housing authority for their redevelopment. Is this some type of oversight or just?
Asking me?
I don't really know where it came from for their slide.
It was just thrown out as a possibility. I mean, there was no
Yeah.
commitment of those.
Yeah, we're not saying we got dibs on those. We're
Okay.
just use
I
that
was
as
just going to say, we discussed this morning about giving these to the housing authority.
okay,
for
so we're too late.
So, yes, I just wanted to
Councilman, can
clarify.
I,
The second question.
can I add a
Oh,
little
go
bit
ahead.
of information on that? We've been working with Mr. Holston for over a year now. And Neighborhood Services has, during that time, put together maps showing possible inventory of city-owned lots. And so I think we gave that to the Holstons months ago. It's only within the last week that the Housing Authority issue emerged. So yes, there would have been some overlap. Some of the lots that were in the Holston materials are near Des Plaines Garden. And so, yes, they would have had to have been eliminated from the Holston project, but looks like that's a moot point based on this morning.
Gotcha, thank you. And then my last question, again for staff. You kind of, I don't know who asked, John or somebody asked the question. I feel we're gonna win this condemnation suit. I guess the question is, what happens after we win this? And there's a 2-year process to do this redevelopment. Do we then manage, you know, does the staff manage then the evergreen with the tenants and collecting rent? I mean, what do we do in that window until there's funding?
Actually, there's funding on day one. The settlement that we have with the federal government provides that the current subsidy contracts that current ownership receives would then transfer to the city. And in November of 2013, we, the city council, approved the contract with Holston Management Company, another Holston company, to manage Evergreen Terrace should we come into possession. Just like Hilliard Towers is managed by Holston Management, so would Evergreen Terrace. And then the development arm of Holston would get to work on coming up with redevelopment proposals. But city staff has no interest in managing this site.
Right.
Or, you know, I always thought it was, the basic reason for the condemnation wasn't necessarily to have the city own the property, but to have local control of the site. Whether or not that control is exercised from this building, the Housing Authority office, wherever it is, that property needed local control, and it ran into trouble because it was owned and operated by people that were not responsive to the community.
Mr. Mayor, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I had a couple of questions. Again,
Sure.
also, thank you, Mr. Holstein, and your
Very welcome.
staff for coming. Jim kind of touched on one about the ratio
Yes.
of the types of tenants.
Yes.
So I guess you pretty much answered that one for me. The other question was, I guess this may have been asked in a different way, but maybe what I'm hearing. The condemnation case, we win. So before this bucket of money come, how do we
Right.
pay the owners?
Right.
Do that have to come out of city funds until
We
you
would have to come up for a source of that, and the only two sources I can think of is either the city does a bond issue and comes up with the cash and pays off HUD, or HUD lets us assume the mortgages, and mortgages right now are around 12 million. And so if its price is more than 12 million, then that's money we gotta find somewhere. But, you know, we can do it either way. So, like I say, you take your pain now or you take it over time.
So would it be HUD we'd be paying or the owners?
Well,
Or would it really not matter? Somebody
technically, you'd pay the owners, but then the check would go right
To HUD.
to HUD for
'Cause
12
they own
million.
it.
Now, if
Okay.
they're getting 15 million, they're gonna walk away with 3, so,
Okay.
I don't know.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
I just want to, so what would the revenue stream be to pay that bond issue down, the rents?
Well, if the bond issue pays off HUD, then all the money that was normally going to service that debt could go to pay back the bond issue. And like I say, we haven't looked at the numbers that close, but let's say it's what, a couple million a year, or what is it? I mean,
Something.
let's say the whole thing was kept, is it, it's,
We can
let's,
go back to it.
let's say the debt service of the whole place is like 2 million a year, okay? Well, that 2 million a year, goes away if you pay off HUD, but now that 2 million a year can go and pay down the city every year,
And then the debt service is less than that.
okay?
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
But what would the revenue stream they pay down the bond issue? There's got to be some type of revenue stream, right, to pay that down? Does it come from the rents or?
Well, it depends on what ultimately happens to the project.
What would happen is you would use the existing project while we're in line to get the funding for the redevelopment. Let's say it's 2 or 3 years. You would use that to pay down the bond sum. And then let's say that we're gonna go do some off-site housing for relocation purposes. If it's on city-owned lots, the city could charge an acquisition price for those lots to the project. So let's say we're gonna do 50 infill housing things, and each one of those lots, let's say, goes for $100,000. I mean, I don't know whatever. And so then there's some money that can go against the bond. And then we tear down some of Evergreen Terrace, which happens to be owned by the city, and we're gonna build, let's say, a 100-unit mid-rise. Well, that 100-unit mid-rise could be made to pay for that piece of land, which then is more money to go. So that's a possibility, yeah.
Jeff, didn't we, at one time, didn't we talk about the income they were making off of this site?
Yeah, the property currently has an arrangement with HUD where it receives over $4.5 million per year, or $1,100 per apartment per month. And should the city come into title, those contracts would flow to us.
It's not,
So they
it's not
stay
their
in place.
profit, though.
They
There's
stay-
money.
Oh, that's gross.
Well, that's the gross before expenses and before debt service. Yeah.
Somebody else.
Me. So, Mr. Holston, it's safe to say that the more specific we get in what we intend to do, the more specific you can be as a consultant.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're kind of premature in having brought you here for exact numbers, but we get an overview.
Yeah, and we need to start here with this. Yes.
Okay, and Jeff, I had one question. Mr. Holston kind of made it come up in my mind. You talked about, hey, if they've got a $12 million mortgage, and I don't know what it is, and the court orders $15 million in payment,
Right.
whoever owns is making some profit. I hear everybody referring to the Gidwitz family. Is that the only owners, or are there other investors involved in this property?
There are many other investors.
Can we get a list of that?
I think I have a list that has been distributed to the council, but probably not in a few years, so I can certainly circulate that.
Could you do that? Thank you.
I mean, Councilman Hug, basically this boils down to the battle of the appraisers,
Okay.
so you better get a good appraiser.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Holston.
Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you
bet.
very much. Sure.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Somebody out there had a question. Who? I don't know. Step up to the microphone, please, and give your name and address.
Georgine Williams, 811 Elizabeth Street. I liked your presentation of what the apartments look like. Can you tell me how they look after they've been occupied for so much time? Are they still in that condition? You said the crime was down, but what about the property upkeep?
That's a real good question. That goes to property management. We've been in property management, again, since 1975, so I think I've seen every trick in the book. We do get into our apartments about 4 times a year to do routine inspections. We do a thorough inspection once a year that is part of information that has to go to the funders like HUD. So we're in the apartments quite frequently, plus our resident services, they're in for other reasons. So everyone is instructed if they see housekeeping issues or health safety type issues, that they got to bring it to management and get those things cured. So obviously, we don't want the apartments to be trashed because it costs a lot of money to put them back together. So, but you will have a small percentage of folks that, in spite of the efforts of Kendra's group or, property management saying, come on, clean it up, that they just can't do it or they won't do it. And then, we'll have to turn that unit. But we try and keep that to a minimum.
The houses that you're going to have in the community, do you monitor those? Your before picture looks like my Section 8s now. And I mean nothing personal on anybody, it's just all mixed, but do you come into the communities then in the Section 8 houses and monitor?
Yeah, we monitor those the same as if it was a multi-unit apartment building. We just have roving staff.
And where did most of the people from the projects in Chicago have to go? Because there's quite a few down there.
That was a point of contention for a lot of suburbs. A lot of former public housing residents got vouchers, and then they took them to live elsewhere, and they sort of inundated the south suburbs, and they also, a lot of them went to the west side, which was not the purpose of it. The purpose was to have everybody sort of assimilate and scatter, but it was a community, so they still sort of stayed concentrated.
Well, it's their homes, and they
That's
want
right.
to be by their
They
families.
wanna be by their friends and family.
So these from Evergreen can now go back to Chicago if you have the units.
We just might.
We might. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Bob?
I want to say, first of all, this is an evergreen, and a lot of the issues which existed in the 90s aren't there anymore with respect to crime. People, like this woman who came up here a few minutes ago, one of the responses was, well, are you going to have room for them in Chicago? A priority should be, these are low-income residents. They are Americans. They are citizens of this city. We need to show them respect, and if we have to relocate them here in Joliet, in the Kappa area, or anywhere, in the mayor's neighborhood, my neighborhood, that should be done. We should respect these individuals who live in public housing. Also, you talked about the Joliet Housing Authority. I think it would be wise to go to HUD to see if the Joliet Housing Authority, which has been a troubled housing authority in the past, and as we know recently, there's been a tremendous shakeup there, if they're even capable of handling this size of a project working in conjunction with the city. Crime is down there, and we need to also consult with the neighbors who actually live next to Evergreen Terrace, the St. John's area. Those people actually live next door to Evergreen Terrace. We always talk about Kappa. I have a lot of respect for Kappa, but Kappa is a small organization. When they have their meetings, they barely have 10 people there. We need to expand and include everybody that lives in that area, who actually lives next door to Evergreen. And it should be Joliet residents that are getting involved. We have a lot of people from the business community. I know Mr. Slinkard is here, but we should have people that actually live in Joliet that have input, not people that live outside of our community coming in here to tell us what they think we should do. I don't go to Shorewood or Naperville or any other community and tell them or their city councils or their village boards or their housing authorities what they should do, and they should respect us as well. So it is, with respect to you, our Evergreen is not Cabrini Green. As a housing authority commissioner in the 90s, I went to Cabrini Green, and you had to wear helmets, and you also had to have police guards. That's not the case here in Joliet, Illinois. And in fact, I think if you look at the police blotter, there hasn't been an arrest from Cabrini Green there in several months. In fact, the hot spot in Joliet is Larkin Village and Bellarmine Drive, where those private developments are. But I just wanted to say, Mr. Mayor, that these people should be treated with respect. They're citizens of this city, primarily minorities, but they should be treated with respect. They're human beings, and they shouldn't be treated, as one said, well, can we send them back where they came from? Well, where did they come from? They live here in Joliet. They're Joliet residents. If they can be relocated in Joliet, they should be. And I'd like to see that map myself. I don't know if I have to get it under the Freedom of Information Act to see where those relocation lots are in the city that the city might buy to relocate some individuals who live there. I want to see if they're spread out evenly throughout the city. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, come on. Come on.
Speak right into the microphone. Greetings, other statespeople and, councilmen of this, on the agenda today. But like what I was, my
Address, please.
IF BB Pro Chris Pedersen, 702 Vine Street, Joliet, Illinois, 60435. What I was saying is this going to affect one zone of our city in our municipality, the project? Because we just can't have a bunch of, is this going to just affect one zone? That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't understand the question.
We have zones in the city. Is this going to affect one zone? Yeah.
Districts.
District zones. Is this going to affect one zone, one district, or is this going to be a project across the board?
As far as the people that move,
Yeah.
it's going to affect throughout the city. It's not going to be one area.
So it's our population will grow then too?
Not necessarily. Maybe.
Because I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but what I'm saying is that it will affect all zones and districts in the municipality in the city of Joliet, Illinois.
That remains to be seen.
Okay.
All right.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Anybody else?
Can I just make a comment?
Yes, you can comment. Sure.
Go on. Mr. Hernandez, just to respond to your issue, I do have a lady that lives across the street from Evergreen Terrace. And in fact, I shared this with Mr. Sheridan that was here from the St. John, Cunningham and St. John. They meet together. And anyway, the issue that she's had for many, many years is her windows are always broken out. She lives in a single-family home there across the street. And every time she gets a window fixed, it's broken again. So my comment about this is she no longer gets her windows fixed. She just lives in her home with the windows boarded up. Is that quality of life for her?
Has the police determined that it was somebody from Evergreen that did that? Has there been a police
Yes, this has been an ongoing. It hasn't happened recently because her windows are boarded. But
You have copies of the investigation that shows that it was an Evergreen resident?
well, I'm not here to argue with it. I'm just going by what she told me.
But you don't know if it's an Evergreen resident?
Excuse me.
It could have been people that
Conversation with
it just could have been, I don't have, I can't answer your question, okay? But that's what I was told, all right?
I'm
Second of all,
I'm
was
sorry,
there,
go ahead.
wasn't there a shooting at Evergreen Terrace not too long ago, like last week? Chief?
Yes, there was. There was a incident reported where a subject apparently shot himself in the leg. It's still
Wasn't
currently.
that was there an arrest there?
I believe he was charged with it. I'll have
So we
to
recently had an
verify.
arrest there as well?
We did.
Okay, thank you. That's my own comment.
Anybody else? Russ, I seen you stood up.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, thanks for a great presentation. Thank the council for great questions. I think you did an absolutely outstanding job of understanding what Mr. Holston is saying. And thank Mr. Hernandez for pointing out that these people need to be treated with respect. And to satisfy my residency requirement to you, I am a resident of Joliet. So I am speaking as a resident as well as for the Chamber of Commerce. We are excited about the possibility. We know that there's a long way to go. There's a lot of decisions to be made before any direction is taken. But I would hope that what we heard here this afternoon inspires us to continue the process and to move to step 2, to have meetings with the neighborhoods, with civic groups, with churches, with anybody who has interest in the future of Joliet. So I encourage the council to proceed. We have no idea who will manage it at this point, nor does it matter at this point. That will come in time as we work through the process. So we at the Chamber would urge you to continue working through the process until we know what will work best for Joliet as well as for the residents of Evergreen Terrace. Thanks.
Thanks, Wes. Thank you. Anybody else?
Question one, give you a chance.
Okay.
Good evening. I apologize. I would have liked to have gotten this letter distributed to all of council, but I was out of town last week on vacation. So if I could quickly read this. I also wanted to give my own personal input as a Joliet resident and a new Joliet resident. My first impression of downtown Joliet was of the public housing project that was across the river from downtown. And personally, it made me sad to see, because I imagined, as a mother of four, I imagined living in those kind of conditions to raise my children. And as a mom, it made me sad to think of the families who were, that was their choice. And having been involved in my former position with the City of Moline in a number of projects there that were residential in nature, that had low mod and market rate units all in the same building, I really felt that was a great way to go, and I think this would be a great way to go for the Evergreen Terrace project. If that can be done at all, it would certainly be a great thing for those families. But I wanted to read this letter that I wrote to Mayor Girani and members of the City Council. On March 13th, the Board of Directors of Joliet City Center Partnership unanimously approved a resolution of support for the City of Joliet's efforts to acquire and improve the Evergreen Terrace property. The City of Joliet has assured HUD that relocation assistance will be provided to help any subsidized renter who wishes to stay in Joliet. Improvements will be made to the property to benefit those Evergreen Terrace residents who remain. HUD's willingness to help provide relocation assistance and financial assistance vouchers to renters who are currently receiving housing subsidies is important and will be beneficial to the city's position. Most importantly, the residents of Evergreen Terrace need and deserve a safer environment, a neighborhood with less density and more spacious homes to live and raise their families. The decrease in density in Evergreen Terrace housing units and the proposed property improvements will provide a higher quality of life for residents. Additionally, these improvements will benefit the near west side of the city, including the Cathedral area neighborhood and other surrounding residential neighborhoods. The current conditions of Evergreen Terrace property are detrimental to the economic growth and revitalization of downtown Joliet. Improvements to Evergreen Terrace will go a long way in banishing the perception that downtown is an unsafe place to work, do business, or visit. While we recognize that the acquisition and improvements to the Evergreen Terrace property will be a costly endeavor, this opportunity presents a real chance for positive change and economic recovery for a blighted area in the city of Joliet. The future positive impact as a result of the city's efforts in this regard for both the residents of Evergreen Terrace as well as the entire city will be significant, and these difficult steps must be taken today. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Thank
you. Ms. Owens, you made a good point about the conditions, and you know, those that have been there have seen the current conditions, and then of course people like myself weren't there in 2005, so I can't compare. Jim Hawk, city manager, I know you sent out an invitation to the council, and it should be at large to community leaders. Apparently management has offered, because there was so much controversy over a limited number of people getting a tour. How many have signed up?
Nobody at this point.
Okay. Just so people know, management, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, management has offered to work through you to offer a tour to any member of the council that needs to go there for the first time or go back there, as well as members of the community, correct?
True.
Okay. If you're interested, you can call Mr. Hawk. And anybody interested can call Mr. Hawk to get, you know, including those of us up here, to go on this tour. But that's not the issue we're back to. I think it was a great presentation by Mr. Holston. I like to oversimplify things sometimes. I tell people, explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. I stole that from a movie. It's too premature for them to give us actual numbers to crunch on, real numbers. And that's not their problem. That's what we're still back to where we started. What's the plan to acquire? What's the plan for redevelopment, demolition, and how much is it estimated to cost? Recently, I came across a report that was published on August of 2011, saw it for the first time a week ago. I think as a council, we need to discuss the EJP consulting report. It's got some serious numbers in it. I don't know why it wouldn't be reliable, I don't know, Jim, is there a way for you to find out what it cost? I believe it was approved to be hired, EJP, in February of 2011. So since I wasn't on the council, I don't know if there was a vote taken and what the cost of that report was. But I'd be interested to know the cost of the EJP report. And I think we need to discuss the EJP report because it's finally come some 2.5 years late, but come to the forefront. Has everybody seen the EJP report?
Yes.
You've all received it?
Yes.
Okay.
I got
No, I got it from Wim Biscuits. You sent it to him, and he sent it to me.
Yeah, because I didn't want to send it to every member of all of the other council. I didn't want to violate Open Meetings Act. Otherwise, has everybody else seen it yet?
I've seen, I have a question about.
Sure.
On the acquisition cost of the site, you have $17,454, blah, blah, blah. And you say this number is based on average of Joliet's HUDs and owners' appraisals. I thought all that information was confidential. How did you get this information?
It was emailed to me. No, the acquisition, Tom, we all know what the estimates are. We all know what the estimates are. This all became public.
Wait a minute. I questioned an appraiser, and the appraiser told me that whenever they appraise something, that is confidential. And my understanding is our attorney and their attorney have this, and I was just wondering how you received it.
Tom, stop with the smoke and mirrors, the smoke screens. We're talking about spending city money. Do you want to go off?
Smoke and mirrors. How did you receive it?
Do you know what the real question is? Why
How did you receive that?
Tom, why did I get this report from somebody in the general public and not my own staff or my mayor?
We were given that report.
Is that the first time you saw it?
No, we reviewed that report.
We never reviewed that report. In fact, in the paper, you said you never saw it.
I didn't recall it. You're absolutely right. But we did. It was presented to us, and you were there.
So, no, it was not presented to us.
Jeff?
Mr. Mayor, you know, Evergreen Terrace has been in court a long, long time. It's been a priority for the city for years, and a lot of discussions have been had, both up here and in closed session. There's been a ton of documents that have been prepared and circulated, and I had no idea that what's called the EJP report was a secret or unknown to anyone on the council until I saw Mr. Hugg's press release Friday. It led me to do a little review of my records to see how that report originated. And based on my review, it all started back in December of 2009 when HUD sent us a letter, actually sent Mayor Schultz a letter indicating that it was going to reject our 2010 consolidated plan and terminate CDBG funding for two reasons. One, that our fair housing planning was not up to date, and two, it suspected that our acquisition of Evergreen Terrace was being undertaken for improper reasons. So the city council, shortly after receipt of that letter, authorized me to go to Washington, D.C. and to negotiate with HUD for some sort of settlement that would allow CDBG funding to continue. And so what the city put on the table in those negotiations was that we would do two things. One, that we would update our fair housing planning report, and two, we would undertake a feasibility assessment or planning review of the acquisition of Evergreen Terrace. And so HUD agreed to that. The city council agreed to that. A settlement agreement to that effect was put together. And on June 15th in 2010, the city council in this room, although you sat to my left because we used to sit over there, enacted a resolution that authorized staff to enter into two consulting agreements, one with a firm to do the fair housing plan, and a second to retain the EJP firm to do the Evergreen Terrace planning study. So that was approved after closed session discussions with the city council in an effort to make sure that there would be no interruption in our CDBG funding. And then it was approved in this room in open session by unanimous vote of the city council, and that was done in June of 2010. Shortly after that, the consulting agreements were executed and the consultants went to work. That work took about 6 months or so. And in February of 2011, I was contacted by the principal that was undertaking the Evergreen Terrace planning study. And it's a affordable housing finance expert by the name of Gail Epp. She offices in Boston. And Gail had put together essentially the rough outline of a feasibility analysis of undertaking various scenarios with Evergreen Terrace, both different types of on-site redevelopment, different types of off-site development that would provide the replacement housing needs that the tenants would have. And so after those discussions, Gail was asking for further direction for me and from the city regarding what the city council wanted to see in terms of future housing on-site and off-site. And so on February 14th, 2011, there was a closed session with the city council and myself where I basically posed those questions to the full city council. That council understood why that report was being generated. It was being generated as a consequence of a settlement agreement with HUD that led to the reinstatement of $1.2 million in CDBG funding. And we went through and had a pretty healthy discussion about the various scenarios for redevelopment, particularly on-site, because the problems with Evergreen Terrace were in that neighborhood. The stakeholders were in that vicinity, and those were the people the tenants were there. We're trying to be responsive to that group. So as a result of direction I received from the city council in closed session in February of 2011 regarding that feasibility plan, I relayed that direction onto Ms. Epp, who went back to work and continued on the plan, trying to accomplish for the city some big picture conceptual plans for the options that the city would have, including financial options, not only development options, but financial options. In June of that year, the city manager and myself did receive a rough draft of Ms. Epp's report. We met with Ms. Epp. I think Mr. Malesio was involved in that meeting as well as the city's CDBG officer. And we gave Ms. Epp further direction regarding the plan, and she responded to that. And we actually took it to the Land Use Committee in open session on June 14th, 2011. I think Councilman Fisher was the chair of the committee at that time. Mr. Morris, you were a member. Susie Barber was a member. But at that time, I remember giving a verbal presentation to the committee about the contents of the report, and that focused primarily on the redevelopment scenarios. At that time, the city was attempting a hard negotiation with HUD that would allow it to proceed with the condemnation and preserve its CDBG eligibility. There's no doubt at that time HUD did not want us proceeding with the condemnation. They were using CDBG as leverage to try to get us to drop the case. And they were insisting that the city make certain commitments regarding the site should we come into title. And this report was being used to assist the city in making those commitments to HUD. And so that's why there was discussion at Land Use Committee about replacing 356 units as a potential scenario somewhere in the community. There's discussion about modifying housing on site to include perhaps an elderly component. And so all those things came out of Ms. Epp's report. They were discussed with various committees and of the council and the council itself. And actually the Land Use Committee on June 14th did take that subject up. The next stop was the full city council. On August 2nd, 2011, the report was nearly complete, and I wanted to have an opportunity to discuss what I expected to be the final options regarding the report. And so we did have a closed session on August 2nd, 2011, and the discussion took over an hour. A large part of that discussion centered on the history of this report and the fact that it arose out of HUD's effort to terminate our CDBG funding because of what was going on with Evergreen Terrace. And I recall quite clearly at that meeting telling the council that we had engaged a planning consultant, that the report was nearly final, that it had to go to HUD in the next couple of weeks, and that according to the financial analysis prepared by the consultant, that it appeared that the project was financially feasible, that between the subsidy contracts that HUD provides and the tax credit, such as Mr. Holson described this evening, that there was a lot of capital that would be available to the city, no matter what decision it ultimately made regarding on-site and off-site development. So that discussion occurred on August 2nd. We had another meeting a couple of weeks later, again in closed session, shortly after the federal government filed a counterclaim against the city of Joliet in the condemnation case regarding the taking. And we again had a discussion about the CDBG and the planning work and the options that were available to the city. So that was the history of this report. I didn't even look to see. I know I've referred quite often to planning that was undertaken by the city over the years that established that between the subsidy contracts and the tax credit markets, that there were federal resources that could be used to finance whatever ultimate decision this group makes regarding the redevelopment of the Evergreen Terrace site and the replacement of any housing units should there be a reduction in density at the Evergreen Terrace site. I don't know that I cite to this specific report by name very often, but I know I've spoken about it frequently. I didn't bother to check the 2012 and 2013 closed session minutes to confirm that. I just recall that. I can tell you that this report was sent to HUD in August of 2011, and it wasn't too long thereafter that the city and HUD were unable to reach an agreement. And so basically that was it, that the report was compiled for the purpose of negotiating that settlement. It was produced with the hopes of preserving that settlement. The settlement lasted for a year. We received over $1 million because of it, but then it fell apart after that when HUD realized that the city was serious about proceeding with the condemnation.
So it was presented to us.
It was discussed numerous times with the council in open session, closed session, and with the land use committee.
What I would interject there in response is, I'm sure you may have referenced it, and by your own admission, Jeff, without referencing our RJP. It's not my question. Why weren't we given the report? That's my question. I can read. You said we discussed it at one point for an hour. It's a 130-page report, Jeff. The hour must have had to be a very cursory, like you said, mention of it. And you're right, you have told us, but never, that I recalled, use the term RJP consulting. Well, we've got reports and studies over the years that would justify. Now, nowhere in the RJP report, which I did go over, nowhere from Mr. Holston is there a 110% guarantee that this money is going to pay for it. It's likely, it's probable, it's always happened. Now, that's not even my question. I don't want to discuss policy with you, just legal issues. And I'm not sure why I'm talking to the city attorney about a development issue when we have a development director over there. But this, as everybody on this council indicated, report never made it to us. I don't know what you did before May of 2011 because I wasn't on the council. I know that since May of 2011, this report was not given to me like it was emailed to me.
Councilman, all I can tell you is what's in the closed session minutes from August 2nd, 2011. You were on the council then, you were at the meeting. I discussed the report. I don't know if I had the report with me at the time. I certainly have.
Jeff, did you give us the report? Did you make copies of a 130-page report at any point?
You know, I don't know what distribution there was of the report, but it was the fact that we had the report and what the report concluded was discussed with you in closed session. It does not benefit me in any way at all.
That's not insinuated, Jeff, but it's amazing that every member except for one who they couldn't reach for comment, every member that was interviewed by the media said, no, never seen the report. We're all collectively with amnesia. No, we're not. So I really don't want to have this conversation and put you in the middle because it's not your responsibility as the attorney to give us a development report.
Well, you asked me why I didn't give it to you.
Only because you claimed that you had given, some information. Now, what you did or didn't mention in a period of an hour or 5 minutes, I don't recall, to be honest, either.
Yeah.
But this report never made it into our hands. And I found it shocking when I got it and read through it and saw the numbers, unless it's a bogus report.
Well, I'm not sure what you're insinuating, Councilman, but the firm's name is EJP. We discussed it at length. The fact that the report had been prepared was disclosed to you. I know it's been 3 years. It was probably the first time you, as a new councilman, had an opportunity to deliberate in executive session about Evergreen Terrace. I don't know why you don't remember it, but it was discussed.
Jeff, in all fairness, if I got that report, I'd still have it in my filing cabinet at home. Call me a rookie if that's what you wanted to just do, and I can take that because obviously a month later I was a rookie. But I'm a researchaholic. My wife will tell you, I throw nothing away when I research things. It doesn't exist in my file. It didn't exist in the memory of any council member that we received it. We didn't. What you're trying to tell me is somebody, whether it was you or somebody else, mentioned it, may have described it. Well, apparently, for the last 3 to 6 months, we've had some pretty heated debates up here saying, do we have any kind of plan, any kind of report with numbers on it? Even if you did give us the report and we forgot, somebody should have brought it forward, and I'm not saying you, because we were debating numbers.
Councilman, we have a lot of company here tonight, but if you have the report and have read it, then you understand that the purpose of that report was to preserve CDBG funding and to take a look at all sorts of scenarios that were posited as potential redevelopment opportunities for on-site and for off-site. On-site, what primarily was proposed was elderly. That was not acceptable to HUD, okay? Off-site, what was proposed were replacements of anywhere from 50 to 356 units. The conclusion of the report was that between the federal subsidy contract provided by HUD and the tax credit market, that there were sufficient resources to finance the construction of 356 units. That's the conclusion that I shared with the council in closed session when we talked about the report. I've been a pretty strong advocate for the acquisition of Evergreen Terrace, and I've told the council on several occasions that there are resources available to affordable housing investors, both tax credits, CDBG funding, HAP funds in this particular case, and that there is a great opportunity for the city to affect some sort of change at Evergreen Terrace using these federal resources. This document substantiates what I've been saying for the last
Well, actually, Jeff, it does, and it says that these revenues, these sources should be available. Yeah, I parse words. Should, not guaranteed, 100%. That's what I'm looking for. And I was looking for that report, and everybody up here that argued with each other about the numbers wanted some kind of estimate, preliminary, that would be in this report. So regardless of whether you mentioned it, we never received the report, whether it was the former city manager, whether whoever else, I'm not casting this at you, Jeff. We never physically received the report. Once we started debating this hotly contested issue in the last 3 to 6 months, somebody should have brought that report to us. It was germane and relevant.
Well, fair enough, Larry, and the conclusion of the report is the tax credit system and the HUD subsidies that we have through the federal settlement should be able to pay for redevelopment.
Should, correct.
Larry. I think both of you made your point. Bob?
Yeah, Jeff, I think this has been, I agree with Mr. Slinker, it's been a very positive discussion, so I don't want to turn it negative, but I do think a couple of things need to be clarified. If you're saying the purpose of this report was to preserve CB&G money, it obviously failed. We lost the CB&G money. HUD looked at that report and said this is not realistic. So, and I think that's the undercurrent that I don't think people in the community or even on this council totally understand. Mr. Holston explained, and I think you explained it very well, but Councilwoman Quillman asked a question, how did the city of Chicago get rid of their high-rise projects? Well, the answer is they didn't. The city of Chicago didn't have anything to do with it. It was Chicago Housing Authority. And we're in uncharted waters here, or murky waters here, because the city of Joliet is trying to do something that, to my knowledge, no other jurisdiction has done on this scale. And I think a colossal mistake was made, and I'm not sure, I wasn't on the council either, when things went off track with HUD. Initially, Mayor, you referenced that HUD was on our side, HUD was backing this. Somewhere along the line, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was comments that were made about running rats out of Joliet or other things that were said, HUD turned against us, HUD sued Joliet. And it's why we are where today. I don't think we'd be having this debate if HUD was on board or had been on board. So, I'm not pointing the fingers at anybody, but I think it needs to be underscored that the report, you're saying the report says this is possible. HUD came to the exact opposite conclusion, and it is alarming. I think the questions and vetting this issue and continue to vet it are fair. I think we need to do it because there are obviously different opinions about what that report was saying, and not by members of this council, by the housing agency in the United States didn't buy it. So,
If I may just quickly, the original, when we started this, correct me if I'm wrong, when we started this, the Secretary of HUD was for this 100%. Then he ran and got elected to Congress or something. They put a new secretary in, and he flip-flopped and they were against it. That's what.
and it's caused the problem that we have today.
Jim?
Good evening. Jim Rolfe, and I am a resident of Joliet as well. I was in the room with Secretary Martinez when the meeting that you're talking about took place. I traveled to Washington 3 or 4 times with city officials to talk to them about HUD. We talked to them about, first and foremost, trying to eliminate a generational problem for children who are at Evergreen Terrace. You can say it's changed, and maybe it has a little bit, but I can also tell you that 3 United States senators, and I believe I'm correct, toured the facility. United States Senator Dick Durbin, United States Senator Peter Fitzgerald, and I believe successor to the seat that Mr. Fitzgerald had, Senator Barack Obama, also toured Evergreen Terrace, and all of them were supportive of this. I think the debate is healthy. I think the tension is good. I think you've heard some great plans that are potentially something that could evolve if we can all see the light and make this thing work. I would suggest to you there is no box. So let's not think out of the box. Let's start thinking there is no box so that we can look at all the different options that are available. I'm not sure, Councilman Hugg, there are guarantees. I'm a banker. There used to be guarantees.
We agree.
So not so much anymore. And the debate on all the different things, I think, is important. I think we need to do this. I think we need to understand that we're trying to make the quality of life for the people that live in Evergreen Terrace, the people that live around Evergreen Terrace, and indeed all the citizens of Joliet have a higher quality of life as a result of addressing an issue that has been a significant challenge. My first trip to Washington, D.C. was 7 or 8, maybe 9 years ago. And I can remember sitting there directly across from Secretary Martinez, having this discussion, and he said he was supportive of it as he looked to his left and his right, and he saw legal counsel all around him. He said, unless they tell me there's something I can't do, we are going to support the city of Joliet. So now we have to figure out, how do we get that support back? And I think some of it's returning. The funding that you talked about has been released because I think HUD understands that the city has nothing but the right thing in mind in doing this. This isn't about not letting somebody live in Joliet. If they want to live here, they can live here. If they want to go somewhere else, the voucher that they may have, which is not currently transferable or portable as it might be called, doesn't give them that option. We don't know, and it's up to them. It's not up to us. What is up to us is to make this place better for the future, because that's what all of you are here trying to do for the city by serving as council members. I'm sure it's a thankless job in many respects. Let me thank you for your service. We may not disagree, and that's okay, because that's what the United States is all about. It is about healthy debate. It is about tension. And whether this form or that form has transferred from one desk to another, I can't answer that, nor would I attempt to. All I can say is there's a lot more to come, and we need to be focused on what's the right thing to do. It is going to cost money. One way or the other, it will cost us something. The amount is unknown. And trying to minimize it, you heard Mr. Holstein in his remarks mention that one of the things they tried to do was look at the least expensive option when they did something. Tear the building down or refurbish it. and they found out tearing it down was the right thing to do. It would surprise me that if that is not the right thing to do in this case. I wouldn't suggest I know for sure, but I think we have an obligation to move forward, and I think the debate is important. I encourage you to continue it. I encourage you to think about what it means for the future of our community at large. It is one component of it, but it's one that has its challenge for everybody because of what it commands and demands from the city in terms of support historically. With that, I would thank you for the time.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you. Thank you. Are we done? Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh.
No, we haven't started now. We haven't started the agenda.
I know we haven't.
Real quick, I'm going to thank Mr. Rolfe. Jim, thank you for, for your comments, and thank you for saying exactly what I'm trying to get across. As stewards, good stewards of the money, there are no guarantees. And that's, and by my calculations, which are amateurish at best, I'm sure, that's a $57 million roll of the dice.
Well, we'll see.
And that's what we need to know. And unless we're going to discuss the report further, I'll have to stick with those numbers.
All right. Jim, moving right along. Thanks, folks, for coming. Don't be embarrassed if you want to leave. Probably some of us would like to go have a beer ourselves.
I've got a few things on the
We were here at 7 o'clock, don't forget.
If I can turn your attention to the agenda, I've got Council Member 144-14, which is filling a couple of positions. We have a notification of retirement of our information service technician. I'm looking to rename it the Information Service Manager position. Also the Finance Director position. And back when there was reorganization and that position was made a department head, that position did not get upgraded from Group 2 to Group 1 in terms of benefits and also the salary range. So I'm looking for your approval there before I advertise the position. The next item is 146. There's a public hearing on eminent domain for the multimodal transportation project. This is where the new bus station will be located. We need some property for the widening and realignment of Joliet Street, and it's also needed for stormwater detention of that parking lot area. The property's owned by Harris Bank and is controlled by Ace Iron and Metals, and we've made good faith offers to purchase, and they've declined our offers. We are on a time schedule in order to continue our construction of the bus area and all of the parking, and so we're asking for your approval on eminent domain and quick take powers of that site following the public hearing tomorrow.
Your Honor, just one question, Jim, then.
Sure.
Is that a property appraised and the fair market value was determined, or how's that work done after that?
Yes, and we're offering that fair market value based on our appraisal.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor?
Sure.
Jim, this is the same slice you showed us in executive session, that map?
Last week, yes.
Yeah.
Closed session.
Any other questions?
Item 149 is a resolution authorizing the purchase of what should be 251 North Joliet Street, not south, and 103 West Webster. We're looking at acquiring these properties for paved lot that'll add to our existing parking lots in a total of $30,000. General fund will not be used. We'll use our TIF dollars that can only be utilized for this kind of purchase. Any questions? If not, item 151 is plans for the multimodal transportation project. We've got to construct a temporary passenger platform for the Heritage Corridor line. It'll be located under the northeast corner of Jefferson Street and Mayor Art Schultz Drive. Union Pacific Railroad and BNSF both have jurisdiction over the site. However, once it's built, the operation and maintenance will be by Metra, and you'll see a subsequent agreement to this one for the operational side with Metra. Moving on. Excuse me. Item 152 is a memo. With the absence, the departure of our finance director, we typically have 4 people on staff that are allowed to be signatories for checks, vouchers, and warrants on behalf of the city of Joliet. And so in the absence of a finance director, we're proposing Paul Pluth be given that temporary duty. Item 157 is a request to purchase accessories for police cars. It's a light bar transportation, dividing the 2 areas. We had just 1 bidder for the light bars and 2 bidders for the transportation partition, and low bidders are recommended. The item 135, in it, I'm requesting cancellation on retaining a payroll consultant because I want to move directly to item 158, which is what will take its place. And I've got a brief PowerPoint presentation here for your review. And is it easier for me to go up there? So, with our finance director leaving, what we're finding is we've got a problem. We've got a situation with our payroll program and where we want to go. Right now, we're a year behind schedule. We've had numerous false starts. And as I said, our project leader left the organization a couple weeks before our date that we were going to go live. So we've passed it on. And I want to thank Scott Kinsella and Ken Mihalik for both stepping forward and taking control of this project and making the analysis and recommendation that we've got before you this evening. There were obvious concerns raised by not only the department heads, but we had a meeting with all of the union presidents, and they were all on board, but they all had concerns that their employees did not have the tools, did not even have the ability to go online and enter their data. And so that was obvious concern. They all had buy-in, but not as to the readiness. And of course, they wanted to see it successful as much as we do, because if you lose the employees during that buy-in period, you can lose them forever. So that, in essence, recognized that our staff training was not complete at all. So during the initial evaluation, we engaged Paytech, who was recommended by ADP for the project management and technical expertise. Found out that we're much further behind than we expected, and a lot of the basics, like our work rules, base pay scales, step-up pay, and how to enter overtime into the system were incomplete and obviously not tested. So we couldn't do any kind of parallel testing with our current Ceridian program to the ADP program. So there were these application errors and also some basic time clock problems that persisted. So our recommendation is to stabilize our project team, which includes ADP, Paytech, Baycor for the training, along with our internal team. We contain the scope changes. We break it into 2 phases, one of resynchronization, the other of implementation. Resynchronization being first is to take a look at the completion of the project evaluation, stabilizing our applications and technology, reset our implementation date and our plan, and as well as our training plan. And last but not least, the financial requirements. In the interim, we'll take a look at the work rules, all of these step-up pays and special assignment pays. We'll continue aggressive implementation posture. They have daily meetings, looking at resolution focus and engaging all of our departments. We're increasing the level of project communication to all of the staff. We're increasing the level of exposure to the application by the staff through the training, and we're going to reestablish that training schedule as soon as possible. What we're talking about in terms of a financial impact is about $100,000 per month. Fund 1 phasing that we're looking at here is about $200,000, and we'll show you on the PowerPoint how that will be implemented. We're anticipating potentially $400,000 to $500,000 in additional cost. A lot of this is because we're special in terms of the various pays that we have that are mandated by our labor contracts, the functional expertise that we don't have, or technical expertise, and the training resources that we don't have on staff. So you may say, well, what happens if we abandon the project at this point? Well, we've had expenses to date of about $360,000. We've had more than a year of lost staff time. We've got the operational risk, which is we've got a 25-year-old AS400 system that we built ourselves, which is the real reason that we decided we need to change our payroll program, because it could fail at any time, and there's no backup. Right now we've got momentum, and we want to maintain that momentum during the transition period. And as I said earlier, we don't want to lose the employee buy-in that we have right now. Let me go back, though. I was online saying, where did this $360,000 cost come from to begin with, and why are we looking at this additional cost? And I think I put in my cover memo that this was grossly underestimated in terms of the financial commitment that had to be made by the city in the first place. And I just looked online, and Reno, Nevada, bigger than us, but not many more employees, took 18 months and $1.5 million to implement their ADP system. So we've got a tentative schedule, and before you this evening, or tomorrow evening, we're asking for your approval on the payroll and timekeeping services with Paytech and Baycor Group, and then authorizing staff to continue working with the conversion and the assistance of ADP. So we're going to look at the resynchronization phase here, and then the implementation phase, and then also the post-go live. Then we've got a tentative cost for the resynchronization, and a grand total, so we're looking at $150,000 during, and I think these numbers are high, but I don't want to underestimate, because we're still looking at quite a bit less than what we're seeing other cities have spent on implementation of this kind of plan. Then we've got the implementation phase where we actually run parallel systems with our current payroll, and then our go live, and the post analysis. Whenever you implement these, there will be failures, and that's how you find out. We want to be prepared, but when there is failure, we'll reconcile those and get those things improved, and then we'll be on our own with ADP. So be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Are we currently still paying Ceridian Services and ADP?
Yes, we are.
And that's been, what, almost 2 years?
Yeah, well, we need them till we make that full conversion. And even when we make that conversion, we'll pay a couple thousand a month to have the information that we can go back to and access if employees say, hey, wait a minute, my vacation time's wrong, or I have more sick days. Well, you know, even 2 months after the go live and post, we need to have access to that information, but it'll be severely cut from where it is today.
Right, and then with the finance director leaving, did I read that correctly, that you thought in 2 weeks we'd go live?
That's right. That was the
Now it's
plan.
Take an additional 18 months, and what do we say?
I don't think,
360,000?
the finance director leaving is not the reason we're in the situation that we are. I think we would have come to the same conclusion with the finance director still here. All I'm saying is that Rachel was the lead person
Right.
in terms of communicating with ADP and Baycor, and so that's why we need this resynchronization, so that we can, staff here today can take control of the process and communicate with everybody, all the players we need to make this work, and also communicate with our employees so that it's accepted.
Mayor? Jim, just a blunt question. Are we over budget now because of these?
You better believe we
How
are.
much, exactly?
Well,
The numbers you gave us here, or less?
No, the numbers, the money we've spent has been within budget. The money going from this point forward, we will be over budget and have to amend our budget.
I might suggest Councilman Coleman and myself to have a CTIS
CTIS
committee
meeting.
and keep track of this.
I was just thinking of that
Okay.
because
See,
when it was
go on.
presented to us, well,
It's been before CTIS
Yeah.
and Finance Committee, and
we did question the cost of it being not enough at the time.
but I wanted to present it to you tonight, to everybody, because it is a big, cost item, because you all need to understand what's going on. And I think in the memo I said we will provide regular reports to the Finance Committee, but it can be to the entire council, or whatever committee you deems appropriate.
I think committee of the whole, maybe. Larry,
I'm sorry.
committee of the whole.
All right, let's do that.
Let's do that.
Scott, can you put together a presentation and, we need to keep our thumb on this.
Absolutely.
Any
Yes,
other
Councilman,
questions?
yes, we can.
So would that
thank
be,
you.
Wait a minute,
Go ahead, Jan.
wait a minute, I think I'm still chairing the meeting. John, you want to talk?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Jim, just a question here, based on your presentation. So you said that we're 12 months to 18 months out as far as completion and implementation of the ADP plan. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
What, can we go back to this?
I guess I'm trying to figure out, are we in the red zone here on the 10-yard line? Or are we at the 50? Or are we in, on the 30? Where are we at?
That's okay.
Because I guess,
If you look at the project week, we're looking at approximately 6 weeks from now to be in this resynchronization phase. And then the actual implementation will be another 8 weeks after that.
okay.
And then up to 4 weeks for that post-live situation. So when we say $100,000 a month, we're looking at a potential $400,000 to $500,000, depending upon how fast we can move through each one of these phases.
And did we have, prior to the finance director leaving, did we have a date? I mean, were we given a date? Hey, we're going to go live on this date?
April 1st.
April 1st. Okay.
perfect.
So, yeah. I mean, she's only been gone, or the director's only been gone for 2 weeks. So,
Right,
Okay.
right.
So we obviously weren't.
And let me tell you, I met with the department heads, all the division directors, and announced April 1st is our go-live date. And because there's been so many false starts and stalling on this, people finally went, huh?
Okay.
And took a hard look at it and started getting feedback from their employees. Hey, boss, I can't do this. I can't access that. I haven't had any training on this. I haven't been able to even access it so that I can train myself on it. Okay. And so that was what we discovered. So inside of that week, I pulled back.
Okay.
And
Well, it sounds
said,
like
we
that
need
was
to
a good
regroup.
decision. And just a comment, with respect to, I know you said your core group, your Joliet team. I'm hopeful, and I'm sure you've done this, but I'm hopeful that Ken Mihalich and Scott Kinsella are on this team. The history, the technical skills that obviously Scott brings, and the history and the structure of the city of Joliet, I think those two people are invaluable. And I'm not sure if they were part of this process going forward, but if they weren't, they certainly need to be on this team.
Those two were instrumental in my recommendation and will continue as our internal team leaders in this process.
They need, I think they're key figures in
They
getting
are.
this thing fully implemented, so.
Yes.
Those are my comments. Thank you.
Anybody else? Jan?
Well, I was just going to say, the committee of the whole, can we just put it on as a presentation on the next pre-council meeting? So there's not an extra meeting.
Certainly.
Then get updates, we could leave it on there every month.
Right.
And then
Get updates
just-
every month on it.
Because I think this whole council needs to be involved in this particular incident.
We'll provide regular updates every meeting.
This is a $500,000 number you're talking
That's right.
about here.
I
so,
know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
Okay.
So I would suggest that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Mayor, I think the only other thing we had was a resident who wanted to speak.
Okay.
Just, I think you got a lot of good information today with respect to Evergreen, and you had two members of the business community who also addressed the council. In the end, whatever decision you make on the type of expenditures the city will make, in the end, the residents will make the final decision with election time coming up next year. The same Chamber of Commerce who supported an individual who ran in the last election was defeated in a massive landslide. I think the voters will speak loud and clear depending on your decisions in the next few months with respect to this issue and other issues. Mr. Mayor, a few weeks ago, they had a discussion about a replacement to Susie Barber. At that time, as you know, I said, that's your call, and that is your call. You said you were taking applications and you would interview anyone that was interested. It was my understanding, and I hope that I'm wrong, that Alicia tried to contact your office for an interview, and she was never given one.
You're wrong.
Okay, thank you.
I have one scheduled Wednesday with her.
Okay, thank you. Also, I would hope the day of the meeting, both inside and outside, I was told that this was just not real, that a decision had been made and that Michael Stewart would be named the next city council person for that seat by you.
You're 0 for 2.
Excuse me?
You're 0 for 2.
Okay, I was hoping that. That's why I'm asking you in public,
anybody yet.
right, in public session, because I was told that you were going to pick Michael Stewart, and the interviewing of these people would be irrelevant. Again, Councilman Quillman, with respect to Evergreen, if you have police reports to substantiate that, in my neighborhood, we had a police officer that lived right around the corner, and he even couldn't presume. He had a lot of damage to his police car, to his home, to his garage, and it couldn't be presumed that it was coming from Larkin Village. I think the chief can affirm that crime has escalated there more so than at Evergreen Terrace. But that's my neighborhood, and I get calls all the time from residents talking about damage, and they presume it could come from Larkin Village. But you can't do that unless you have an actual police report, an actual arrest that's been made. You can't make that type of presumption.
It came from visitors that were at Evergreen Terrace.
So there is a police report that,
Somewhere along the line, this was a long time ago, I don't have the dates, but that's what I was told.
oh, so I can research it and find out that there was police reports that were made on that and get together with you on that.
Yeah, please do.
I will, because it's important, because
It is important.
It's
because
important.
It's about the quality of life for not only the the residents at Evergreen Terrace, but also the surrounding neighborhoods, which you yourself got up and said, St. John's and Cunningham, and the people that live around that area. And it is very important. And I just wanted to correct one other item that you suggested before. There are a lot of scattered site housing in the Cathedral area and the St. Pat's area. There's Section 8 2-unit right behind me, so there are already, but we welcome folks because we treat them like anyone else, and there is pride, even though they don't own the homes, but they take pride in their homes. And once they have that pride, there is no issues.
Right, and before you were on the council, when you were challenging Councilman Brophy, who originated the issue, I was working with Mayor Schultz and some of the council people, Mike Turk back in the 90s and 2000s, and working with some of the residents. And the issue back then was we want to get rid of those people because of crime. It should be a quality of life issue.
I always say quality of life.
Right. You came on the council afterward. Right. What I'm telling you is some of the residents of Kappa, what their expressions were back in the day, and what some of the councilmen's expressions were. You know, we heard in the federal report about rats. These are human beings.
Absolutely.
And it should be a quality of life issue. It should not be about getting rid of those people and relocating them in their own neighborhoods, so to speak. It should be throughout the entire city if the city wins its lawsuit. But other than that, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's it?
I have a question. Since he brought this up, would you be willing to publish or to make available in your office those that applied for Susie's open seat?
I'll ask those that applied first if they want, if they okay it.
All right.
I won't do it without asking them.
All right.
Okay.
I've had inquiries of folks wanting to know when we were gonna replace the position.
I'm gonna bring a name, I was gonna announce it tomorrow, and I'm gonna bring a name at the April 15th meeting.
Okay. And then, those who applied. So it's up to you. I just.
If the people that apply don't have a problem. Okay. They wanna keep it, quiet, then I will do that. Okay. Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
It's a motion seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.